Hi there, good afternoon. Welcome to Wednesday's devotional. My name is Lisea Kelly, pastor of Crossover Christian Church in Mount Sinai, Long Island. And of course, reaching out to people all over the world. So I'm always thrilled to hear from you as you come in and listen in today, whether it's live or later. I'd love to hear where you're coming from and feedback, insights. We'd love to hear from you. Last week, I started looking at the poem really from Ecclesiastes 3. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. And today, I want to take a few moments with you to look at the fact that there is a season for everything under the sun and how we can navigate these seasons in a way that doesn't leave us kind of broken up, battered up, because really undergirding today's thought, today's devotional, the thought is this: God wants you and I emotionally whole. So there is a season for everything under the sun. And one aspect I love about this is the reference to seasons. By its very nature, a season is for a period of time. Hi, Ronnie. Great to have you in. So here on Long Island, we have distinct seasons, something I've come to really love and appreciate. At the beginning of spring, it tends still to be very cold, but you see early signs of life. And by the end of spring here on Long Island, we usually get a lot of rain and we don't know if summer's ever coming. And then one day you wake up, the sun is shining and everything is overgrown and beautifully green. Now, the thing about seasons for us in terms of the emotional landscape of our lives is that we can learn to embrace the season we're in, knowing that it doesn't last forever. So there are two elements of this just to touch on. One is when you're in a tough season. So often what we do is we fight it, we resist it, we try and deny it and ignore it. And there's just a phrase I know you're familiar with that really helps embrace difficult seasons. This too shall pass. And when you're able just to frame your season, the challenging, difficult season, with this statement, this will pass, it actually becomes a mantra for the journey that allows you not to fight and to resist, but to own and acknowledge the season. Sometimes you're in a dark place and you think the darkness will never leave, the light will never return, but this too shall pass. I think it's far easier to embrace it. And in order for us to really look at the seasons, my favorite season is summer. A lot of people hate these hot, muggy days like we have today here on Long Island. But another element of looking at life as seasonal is to learn to live in the moment, to celebrate the moment, knowing that even the good is going to pass. That this really means that we need to wake up to what's happening in our lives, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, and to realize that everything is actually transitional. You begin a season, and some seasons move quickly in life, and so we need to be awake rather than sleepwalking. There is a season for everything under the sun. And the second big thought I want to share with you is that God wants you emotionally whole. And today we're going to be focusing on that phrase from Ecclesiastes 3. There is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. There's, this really speaks to me of a rhythm of life, a balance of life. You know, sometimes some of us, as we've grown up, we've been taught not to cry, we've been taught not to get sad. And so we find it difficult then to even begin to own up, in, if you like, to our own emotions. Some of us have been taught not to be too exuberant, not to celebrate too much. So this is really this phrase for me: a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, um, opens up the spectrum of the emotional landscape, and want to explore it briefly with you today in a way that encourages you to come into emotional wholeness. The Psalms express emotions in incredible intensity. And while the rest of the Bible is directed to us, the Psalms really gives us a window on how men communicated with God through a spectrum of emotions. And in some ways, they help us give voice not only to our emotions, but to what God could possibly be saying to us in the middle of our mess of now, in the middle of our hopes or our shattered dreams. So, some keys here in terms of moving into emotional wholeness. The first is express yourself honestly. I think this is a big one for all of us to learn, a big one for people pleasers, and in some respects, in some cultures, particularly women, have been taught, our culture frames us not to express our needs or what we would like to see happen, but rather affirm the group need and the group productivity. So this is a big step in coming into emotional wholeness, is to express yourself honestly. And first of all, express yourself honestly to God. Psalm 55, verse, the first couple of verses says, "Give ear to my prayer, O God, and do not hide yourself from my supplication. Attend to me and hear me. I am restless in my complaint and moan noisily. Because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression, they bring down trouble on me, and in wrath they hate me." And there's some really big emotions that David is talking about here: confusion, oppression, being overwhelmed, moaning noisily, restless, complaining. And I think it may be a novel thought to quite a few of us that the starting point for emotional wholeness is to express your emotions to God. Now, you may be able to do that when you go for a walk. I know some of you, when you get in the car and you play music, you can begin venting, and that's a really good, safe place, as long as you keep your cruise control on in your car so that you don't go too fast. So express yourself honestly to God. But in terms of a full spectrum emotional wholeness, we also have to learn to express ourselves honestly to others. I believe we need to learn to express ourselves without harming ourselves or harming others. And again, this can be tough for people pleasers. And it can be tough because it puts a positive pressure on us to be honest about where we're at. In a way that extends both kindness and grace to the other, and at the same time, even extends kindness to ourselves. This is really a journey of learning, a journey of exploration, of finding safe people where you can really let it down and be yourself in a way that produces health. I found a beautiful gift through the course of life is to have some friends who will just accept me, not in my role, primarily not as anything, but just let's say in front of this person. And when you're loved unconditionally and feedback can be given in a true, loving, honest fashion, there's so much room created, guys, for us to grow in ourselves, in self awareness, and to grow in our relationships. Um, Ephesians 4:32 in the Passion Translation says, "But instead be kind and affectionate toward one another. Has God graciously forgiven you? Then graciously forgive one another in the depths of Christ's love for you." So there's almost a sense of you can extend grace to one another because of the knowledge of the grace that God has already extended to you. So, a big key in emotional wholeness is to learn to express yourself honestly. And I find the safest place is with God, and then reach out to others around you that you can trust. The second key in emotional wholeness is to learn to name what you're feeling. And this may sound obvious. It may sound like, of course, you do that. I want to just unpack this a little bit with you, Liz. Lovely to see you in here. Psalm 55, verse 4. "My heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me." And you get this sense in this, the raw desperation in David's heart at this time. As we learn to name what we're feeling, we can cultivate deeper levels of self awareness. And self awareness, not in a narcissistic way, but self awareness in learning to name what you feel helps you navigate through bring movement to your season, whether it's grief and mourning, whether it's laughter and celebration. You can name it and thrive in it. But it takes some time, it takes some processing. For me, I find it very helpful to write prayers, create prayers that become the cry of my heart. But even so, it takes time to be able to name what you're feeling. Several weeks ago, I experienced a hurtful cutoff of contact by someone close to me. I was powerless except in prayer to hold this hurt. And several days later, I got a text from an unrelated third party who made a little bit of a joke. And under normal circumstances, I would have laughed and actually sent some laughing emojis back. What I found happened was I began to weep and I couldn't stop crying. And I realized as I'm crying, I'm not crying about this stupid little text. I'm crying about this big moment in my life where I've had a cutoff of contact. So sometimes it takes us time to name what we're feeling, to put the emotions in the appropriate place of why we're feeling what we're feeling. So there's some emotional keys here I want to share with you. One is instead of shutting down, reach out. Reach out to God, reach out to friends, and in cases, reach out to a therapist. I've heard from some friends lately just how helpful it's been when you find a good therapist. There's a verse here I want to read and share with you from Psalm 55. As for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon, I will pray and cry aloud, and he will hear my voice. Now, I know it's the Jewish pattern rhythm of prayer, evening, morning, and noon, but it opens up the window for us, really, not to shut down, but open up. The way you wake up in the morning, what you're feeling, may be different to the way you're feeling at night. So, I want to encourage you in your journey to emotional wholeness, to learn and take brave steps to express yourself honestly to God and to trusted people in your lives, to actually take the time to name what you're feeling, because in the naming of it, you can come to terms, you can start to take that journey to peace. And then the third element of coming into emotional wholeness is to give yourself permission to process. Now, we're looking at this phrase, there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. I want to take a few moments to look at the time to weep and the time to mourn. Of course, weeping and mourning does in part speak about grief work. And we call it grief work because it's heavy, it's hard work. When you've experienced a loss of a loved one, a loss of a pivotal job, loss of health in your life, you're carrying a burden in your life that you now need to process, assimilate, and in many respects, we have to make room in our lives for new losses. It's loss that doesn't go away, but it's a journey, it's a process of learning to make peace with it. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross described the stages of grief as the following: denial or shock, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I just want to qualify this because Kubler-Ross actually worked through stages of grief as she worked with clients. The thing is that we all go through grief. We process grief differently and uniquely. So there's no exact miles per hour that you can process your grief. There's also no specific stage one, stage two, stage three of grief, because really we assimilate, we process at different rates, and we may move between different stages and come back and forth as we reminded and relive trauma or the burden that has become a reality. So grief work is really personal. And if you're in this place of taking time to weep and taking time to mourn, I want to stop right here and say to you, be kind to yourself. Don't rush the process, because this is something you have to live with for the rest of your life. Grief work never removes the reality of your loss, but it allows you to make room in your life, to make peace with it and hold it. Another element of mourning is when we realize we've harmed or failed someone. Hurt people. And when we come to our senses, we experience remorse that we inflicted this hurt or harm. And there's true, the old writers call it penitence. There's true remorse, there's penitence, there's deep sorrow when you realize you've truly, deeply hurt or wounded someone. Psalm 51, verse 17 from the Passion Translation says, "The fountain of your pleasure is found in the sacrifice of my shattered heart before you. You will not despise my tenderness as I bow down humbly at your feet." And David the psalmist here is talking about a shattered heart because of his sin before God, and how he knows that God will both heal his shattered heart, but God will also accept and forgive him. I think it's so important for us to realize that there's an appropriate level of mourning when we realize we've wronged or harmed others. In some respects, our global community is going through this as issues of racial injustice are being addressed. And there's so many different elements to this, but wherever injustice is, God weeps and mourns until there is healing and wholeness brought. So there's that element. And then there are times that we weep, guys, where we may not necessarily be sad, but we may be overwhelmed with emotions. And then our tears become the overflow of us processing these emotions. If you've experienced that, if you find that sometimes it's really hard to name your emotions, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments here. I want to encourage you, acknowledge the wounds and the pain. Don't deny your humanity in the journey of processing. Because what my experience has been is that God meets you where you're at, whether you're angry, deeply, deeply burdened, or extremely happy. God meets you and He walks with you in this journey of life that we get to share with Him. The last point of processing that I want to talk about today is the time to laugh and the time to dance. We don't mourn forever. We don't laugh all the time. And it brings a beautiful portrayal of the wholeness, the balance God wants to bring to us. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A joyful, cheerful heart brings healing both to body and soul. But the one whose heart is crushed struggles with sickness and depression." So you you do know this, that there are benefits, there are health benefits to laughter, and I just want to unpack a few. It brings stress relief, it boosts your immune system, it even relieves pain, even momentarily. Another really obvious benefit to laughter is you feel happy when you laugh, don't you? So the homework from Sunday's service, this past Sunday at Crossover, was I encourage people to go and take time this week for belly laughs. Do what you need to get a good belly laugh going on. I just read that there's something called laughter yoga, that you go into a class and you practice laughing. I would suggest get with a pet, a pup, an animal, get with some kids, or get together. This is one of my favorites. Get together with your friends. Every time I get together, when there's a girls' night, I can't wait for those moments where we're laughing more than we're talking, where we're all talking at the same time just because we're so happy. And you find that that joyful, cheerful happiness begins to feed medicine to your soul man, to your inner man. Some of your thoughts can shift. Some of your mood and emotions can shift. There's even a benefit to dark humor in survival stories where people have had to navigate their ways out of wilderness areas where they've been lost, they have no food or water left. There are so many stories where dark humor has been used, where the survivors have told themselves dark jokes to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and they make it out sometimes because of the dark humor. So I want to put this to you: put humor on your horizon, put some happy thoughts on your car dashboard, on your mirror. um, Put words of happiness that feed you happiness, photos of people who feed you happiness around you so that you can really take time to process and absorb this amazing, immense emotion that gives you cause to celebrate, sometimes even in the darkest of moments. So, in closing, guys, I just want to say this: some seasons change us forever, some seasons of grief change you forever. But as we surrender to God, the pain and the triumph, the change in us becomes a testimony to God's goodness. It becomes a witness to God's presence in our lives. So as you go and live, I want to encourage you: live well, live fully, and love deeply, and surrender to God in the journey so that you may be free to weep and you may be free to have those belly laughs. While hurt people, healed people will heal people. And I think that's part of our mission and mandate for the week ahead. Bless you. Thanks so much for joining in. I'd love to hear from you. Have a wonderful day.